It hits you before the coffee even hits your lips. That tightness in your chest when the elevator ascends. The forced, tight-lipped smile you offer to the receptionist while your pulse drums in your ears. The hollow agreement when a senior director asks if you can take on just one more project, and you say yes, even though your nervous system is screaming no. You stand in the shower, psyching yourself up for a simple status meeting as if you're marching into the Colosseum. You tell yourself it's just work. You tell yourself everyone feels this imposter syndrome, this low-grade dread, this paralyzing fear of being truly seen and truly judged by the people holding the keys to your livelihood. But the truth is, you're exhausted from performing a version of yourself that doesn't exist, praying no one notices your hands are shaking under the mahogany conference table. 2,000 years ago, Roman statesmen didn't have Slack notifications or performance improvement plans, but they lived under a microscope of lethal social scrutiny. To survive the backstabbing of the Senate and the whims of the emperor, they didn't rely on mindfulness apps. They engineered a psychological fortress. They called it Comitas, courtesy, the ease of manner that disarms rivals; Gravitas, dignity, the unshakable anchor of self-possession; and Auctoritas, the natural authority that commands the room without demanding it. This trio was their ancient firewall against the chaos of the empire. And it is the exact mechanism missing from your modern burnout. You've tried the modern prescriptions. You downloaded the meditation apps, and you fell asleep to them. You tried quiet quitting, which just meant absorbing the same stress but adding a layer of simmering resentment. You've sat on a therapist's couch and traced your social anxiety back to your childhood, labeling the triggers, and you are still terrified of speaking up in a meeting. Why? Because those interventions treat the symptoms. They teach you to cope with the panic. The Romans didn't want to cope with the panic. They wanted to conquer the soul that produced it. They built an architecture of character so robust that social anxiety could not survive inside it. This is the story of Elena Rodriguez, a 39-year-old junior partner in the cutthroat venture capital sphere of San Francisco, California. She had everything the corporate world said would make her happy: the title, the corner office on Market Street, the 7-figure portfolio, and it was destroying her. The 15th floor of the venture capital firm in San Francisco's Soma district smells aggressively of roasted Sumatran beans and ozone from the overworked industrial printer. It is 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Elena Rodriguez sits at her standing desk, her knuckles white around a ceramic mug that reads "Disrupt Everything," though she feels entirely disrupted herself. Around her, the open-plan office hums with an oppressive low-frequency vibration. It is the sound of mechanical keyboards clacking like distant typewriters, of performatively loud phone calls where associates drop terms like Series B and EBITDA just loud enough to be heard by the managing partners. It is the fluorescent glare of overhead panels reflecting off the polished concrete floors, casting a pale, draining light that washes the color from everyone's face. Who is making this noise? A phalanx of 20-something analysts in Patagonia vests, hungry for blood, and fellow partners who measure their worth by the number of hours they loudly broadcast their exhaustion. What are they doing? They are engaging in the relentless, tribal choreography of corporate visibility, ensuring they are seen working, even if they are producing nothing of substance. When does this happen? Every single day, from the moment the glass doors unlock at 7 in the morning until the last analyst stumbles out at 9 at night. Where does it leave Elena? Trapped in the center of a gladiatorial arena, feeling as though every set of eyes is tracking her missteps. Every hushed whisper in the hallway is a critique of her competence. How does she survive it? By shrinking, by making herself smaller in her Herman Miller chair, staring at the blinking cursor on her Slack message, erasing and rewriting a simple "sounds good" to a senior partner 7 times to make sure it doesn't sound too eager, too passive, or worse, too visible. The anxiety isn't a constant panic. It is a chronic, low-grade nausea. It is the overwhelming internal calculation of every variable in a room before she even opens her mouth. It is walking into the weekly pipeline review and feeling the oxygen get sucked out of her lungs, her brain instantly cataloging the power dynamics. Who is sitting next to whom, who the managing partner is looking at, who just got up to get coffee to avoid making eye contact with the underperformers. Elena knows the data. She has spent the last 3 weekends modeling the Q3 projections. She knows the margins, the burn rate, and the exact month the portfolio company will run out of runway. But knowledge is not power when your nervous system is hijacked by 1,000 invisible social threats. The breaking point does not arrive as a dramatic tragedy. There is no screaming match, no fired client, no shattered glass. It is a micro-collapse. A Tuesday morning stand-up meeting. The rain is slashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows, distorting the gray San Francisco skyline. Elena is sitting at the far end of the table. She has the floor. She is halfway through explaining a critical flaw in a target company's acquisition model when Marcus, a newly minted associate 2 years her junior, interrupts her. "Actually," Marcus says, his voice smooth and entirely unbothered by the breach of etiquette, "I think the more pressing issue is their customer acquisition cost." He doesn't even look at Elena. He looks directly at David, the founding partner. He begins to riff on her data, paraphrasing the exact insight Elena had in her notes, but was too anxious to articulate smoothly. And what does Elena do? What she has always done when her social anxiety flares and the threat of conflict looms. She closes her mouth. She forces a polite, tight smile. She nods along, physically turning her body to give Marcus the floor, as if yielding a physical space she had occupied. David is nodding. "Great initiative, Marcus," David says. Elena stares at the watermark on the tabletop. She is a junior partner. She has the title. She has the equity. But in that moment, she is completely invisible. She has ceded her ground to a subordinate because the physical sensation of holding the room's attention, the racing heart, the flushing of her neck, the dry throat, was simply too painful to endure. She believes the oldest lie the anxious professional tells themselves. If I just work harder, if I just prep more, if I just keep my head down and produce flawless work in the shadows, I'll finally feel safe. But the harder she works, the more invisible she becomes. She is building a fortress of spreadsheets to protect a spirit that is rapidly crumbling. Desperate, Elena reaches out to George Blackwood. George is a ghost of the old financial world, a former senior partner who retired from the firm a decade ago. He lives in a dimly lit, impeccably curated townhouse in Pacific Heights, surrounded by first edition hardcovers and the quiet ticking of an antique grandfather clock. Elena had always been terrified of him when he was at the firm. He never raised his voice. He never rushed. He never seemed to sweat. While everyone else in the office ran around like their hair was on fire, George moved through the chaos like a stone in a rushing river. He seemed utterly untouchable. He was the only person Elena had ever met who possessed what she desperately lacked, an absolute, immovable center. She asks him to coffee, expecting a brief pitying audience. Instead, he invites her to his study. The room smells of old leather and bergamot. George, a man in his late 70s with silver hair and hands that do not tremble, pours her a cup of Earl Grey tea without asking if she wants any. He hands it to her on a saucer. Elena's knee is bouncing 1,000,000 miles an hour. She spills a drop of tea on the saucer and apologizes profusely, her face burning. George sits across from her, regarding her with an expression that is neither pitying nor judgmental. It is simply observational. He waits for her nervous apology to peter out. He leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and fixes her with a gaze that feels like it strips away her job title, her salary, and her performative professionalism. "Are you building a career, Elena?" he asks, his voice a low, resonant baritone. "Or are you building a cage?" Elena opens her mouth to answer, but the words catch in her throat. She thinks of the Patagonia vests, the Slack messages, the blinking cursor, and Marcus stealing her thunder. She thinks of the sheer exhaustion of waking up every day and dreading the sound of her own voice. "I want you to pause this video for a second," the narrator interjects. "I want you to ask yourself George's question. If your job title were stripped away tomorrow, if the email signature and the Slack status and the business cards vanished into the ether, what remains of your dignitas? What is your core dignity? What is the bedrock of your identity when the corporate audience is no longer watching? If you can't answer that, you are already a prisoner of their approval." George does not offer Elena a mantra. He does not suggest she try deep breathing exercises before her meetings. He goes straight for the jugular of her social anxiety, which is her desperate need for external validation. "Tomorrow," George says, "you will wake up at 4 a.m. You will not check your phone. You will not read the Financial Times. You will not prepare for the day. You will sit in a chair in the dark, in complete silence for 30 minutes. You will do nothing but exist." Elena stares at him. "That's it? Just sit in the dark?" "You are terrified of the judgment of others," George replies, "because you have no anchor within yourself. You have no gravitas." The Romans did not invent gravitas as a personality trait. It was a physical, practiced discipline. It is the capacity to bear weight without breaking. You cannot command the external world, Elena, if you cannot sit alone with your own mind in the dark. Tomorrow, you start carrying the weight of yourself. The next morning, at 4 a.m., Elena's alarm goes off. The apartment is pitch black. The San Francisco fog is pressing against her bedroom window. Every instinct in her body screams at her to grab her phone, to check the markets, to see if David has sent an early morning Slack. The anticipation of the workday triggers an immediate spike of adrenaline, but she forces herself to leave the phone on the nightstand. She walks to the living room. She sits in the armchair, and she waits. The silence is agonizing. Her brain, starved of its usual dopamine hits and cortisol triggers, begins to panic. It invents crises. Did I send the wrong attachment yesterday? Did Marcus notice I rolled my eyes? What if the Q3 forecast is wrong? The anxiety swells. Every second feels like an hour. Her leg bounces. Her palms sweat. She is desperate to move, to act, to react. But she remembers George's instruction. She sits. She forces herself to endure the discomfort of her own unmedicated, unstimulated mind. Here is the brain science behind Elena's agony. What she is experiencing is the cortisol loop. In the modern office, every Slack ping, every calendar invite, every passive-aggressive email is a micro-threat. For someone with social anxiety, the threat level is dialed up to 11. The brain's amygdala, the primal alarm system, constantly fires, signaling danger. In response, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis, floods the bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. The brain's locus of control shifts entirely outward. You become a physiological reactive machine, perpetually bracing for the next interpersonal blow. When Elena sits in the dark, she is intentionally breaking that loop. By denying the brain the external stimuli it uses to justify its alarm, she forces the nervous system to reset. The Roman method of morning silence, Gravitas training, is not about emptying the mind. It is about proving to your biology that you are not in physical danger. Over time, this practice thickens the neural pathways between the prefrontal cortex, the rational, decision-making center of the brain, and the amygdala. It builds the brain's inhibitory control. You stop being a slave to the stimulus. You move your center of gravity inward. You stop reacting and start choosing. You are building the neurological foundation of Auctoritas, the authority that comes from self-mastery, not from a job title. Elena survives the 30 minutes. It is not peaceful. It is not zen. It is a grueling workout for her prefrontal cortex. But when she finally picks up her phone at 4:30 a.m., the Slack notifications seem less like bombs and more like data points. She walks into the office that Tuesday feeling a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in her posture. Her shoulders are back, not because she is faking confidence, but because she has already survived the hardest battle of the day, sitting with herself. The test arrives at the 10 a.m. pipeline review. The same room, the same floor-to-ceiling windows. Marcus is there, leaning back in his chair, exuding his usual careless confidence. David is at the head of the table. The conversation turns to a struggling portfolio company. Marcus immediately jumps in, advocating for a rapid, aggressive pivot. His voice is loud, but Elena notices something she never had the calm to notice before. His argument is fundamentally flawed. It's all bluster, no substance. He is performing with confidence, not conveying insight. In the past, Elena would have stayed silent, letting the anxiety win, rationalizing that it wasn't worth the fight. But today, something is different. The morning Gravitas practice has created a millisecond of space between the stimulus and her response. She feels the old anxiety rise, the hot flush, the tightening of the throat, but she does not obey it. She leans forward. She applies the Roman principle of Comitas, courtesy and ease of manner that disarms. She doesn't attack Marcus. She doesn't apologize for speaking. She simply holds his gaze, her voice steady and low, harnessing the authority she practiced in the dark. "I see it differently," Elena says. The room goes quiet. She doesn't rush to fill the silence. She lets her presence occupy the space. "Marcus, the CAC numbers you're referencing are lagging indicators. If we pivot now, we burn through their remaining runway in 4 months. The better play is to optimize the current funnel." She states it as a fact, no hedging. No, I just think, or does that make sense? Just Auctoritas. David looks at her, then looks at Marcus and nods slowly. Elena's right. We optimize. It is a partial win, a single successful engagement in a never-ending war. As Elena leaves the meeting, a profound sense of relief washes over her. For the first time in a decade, she didn't disappear. She was seen. She was heard. She feels a crack in the cage, a glimpse of the woman she could be if she weren't constantly afraid. She thinks, maybe, just maybe, the worst is over. But the corporate world does not reward a single moment of strength. It tests it. Wednesday morning. Elena is riding the high of her breakthrough. She gets to the office early, pours her coffee, and opens her laptop. An email is sitting at the top of her inbox from David. The subject line, urgent, firm restructuring. Her stomach drops. She clicks it. The firm is consolidating the junior partner tier. Half of them will be promoted to full partner. The other half will be let go. The deciding factor is a grueling cross-functional performance review happening this Friday at 3 p.m. She scrolls down, her blood runs cold. The person assigned to conduct Elena's review is not David. It is Caroline, the founding partner from the New York office. Caroline is a legend on Wall Street, a woman who made her name in the brutal boiler rooms of the 80s. Caroline is notoriously ruthless, terrifyingly perceptive, and the exact senior partner who 3 years ago humiliated Elena in front of the entire investment committee, triggering the worst spiral of social anxiety of Elena's life. The corporate storm has arrived, and Elena is standing directly in its crosshairs. It is 2:15 a.m. on Thursday. In 43 hours, Elena Rodriguez will sit across a mahogany table from Caroline, the New York founding partner, who once made her feel like she was made of glass. Elena is sitting on the floor of her kitchen in the dark, her back against the cold stainless steel of the refrigerator. Her laptop is open on the counter, the screen casting a harsh, pale blue light across her face. The Q3 projection spreadsheets are glowing, but she isn't looking at them. She is staring at her phone. George Blackwood's contact is on the screen. Her thumb hovers over the green call button, trembling. She doesn't call. Instead, she types a message. Her fingers move with the frantic, clumsy energy of a drowning woman grasping at driftwood. I can't do it. I can't sit in that room with her. I'm going to panic. I'm going to freeze. Or worse, I'm going to start over-explaining and apologizing for things that aren't my fault. The system isn't working. I still feel the dread. I just want to go back to being invisible. At least when I was a people pleaser, I wasn't paralyzed by fear. I just said yes and survived. She hits send. The kitchen is silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator compressor, a sound that mirrors the low-grade vibration of anxiety in her chest. She waits. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. The dread swells. She has exposed her weakness to the only man she respected, and he has abandoned her. She pulls her knees to her chest, the familiar warmth of old coping mechanisms wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. Just say yes. Just agree. Just make Caroline happy and take the blow. Survive. Then the phone buzzes. It is not a paragraph. It is not a soothing, therapeutic reassurance. It is a single line from George. The Roman way was never designed to make you feel better, Elena. It was designed to make you harder to break. She stares at the words. The cold truth of them hits her like a splash of ice water. She had mistaken Gravitas for a comfort blanket. She thought the morning silence, the anchor of self-possession, was supposed to cure her anxiety, to wash away the fear before the battle. But George is telling her the fear will never leave. Anxiety is a feature of the human nervous system, not a bug. The Roman system doesn't erase the fear. It gives you a structure so impenetrable that the fear cannot dictate your actions. A soldier in the Roman legion didn't feel safe standing in the testudo formation under a hail of arrows. He felt terrified, but he held the shield anyway, because the formation, Comitas, the shared courtesy of the line, Gravitas, the weight of his duty, kept him alive. George is telling her that wanting to retreat into people-pleasing is the instinct of the untrained mind. The real war isn't against Caroline. It is against the part of Elena that would rather be comfortable and broken than uncomfortable and free. She closes the laptop. She doesn't go to bed. She walks to the living room armchair, sits in the dark, and begins her Gravitas practice at 2:30 in the morning. She doesn't try to calm down. She simply refuses to move. She lets the panic wash over her, and she holds the line. Thursday, 10 a.m., the pre-review strategy meeting. The San Francisco conference room is a pressure cooker. The air is thick with the scent of dry erase markers and the acrid, bitter tang of oversteeped black tea that someone left too long on the hot plate. 6 junior partners are seated around the table. The firm's restructuring has pitted them against each other for the remaining partner slots. The usual collegiality has been replaced by a barely concealed predatory tension. Elena takes her seat at the far end, the same seat she occupied during her micro-collapse a week ago. But the woman sitting in that chair is not the same. Her posture is different. She is not shrunk. She is not making herself small. Her spine is aligned, her shoulders dropped, her hands resting flat on the table, a physical manifestation of Gravitas. She is anchored. The meeting begins. David, the founding partner, opens the floor. Immediately, Marcus jumps in. His voice is louder than necessary, a sharp staccato rhythm that fills the room. He is performing. He is trying to establish dominance before Caroline arrives, jockeying for position. He begins to pitch a revision to the portfolio strategy, a revision that directly undermines the optimization plan Elena successfully defended 2 days ago. The old Elena would have felt the instant spike of adrenaline. Her throat would have tightened. She would have interrupted him, her voice rising an octave, desperately trying to justify her position, seeking David's approval with a frantic, "but I think," or "if I could just explain." She would have been seeking validation, not advocating for the truth. The new Elena feels the adrenaline, but she does not obey it. She applies the first pillar, Comitas, courtesy. She does not interrupt. She does not scowl. She listens with a calm, almost unsettling stillness. She lets Marcus speak. She lets him talk himself into a corner, his arguments growing more convoluted as he tries to impress the room. When he finishes, there is a beat of silence. The other junior partners look at Elena, expecting the usual defensive outburst. Instead, she waits 3 seconds, 4 seconds. In the high-stakes corporate arena, 4 seconds of silence feels like an eternity. It is a vacuum of power, and nature abhors a vacuum. By withholding her need for immediate validation, Elena forces the room to turn to her. She has created the space for Auctoritas. When she finally speaks, her voice is low, measured, and unhurried. Marcus, I appreciate the ambition. Comitas courtesy, the disarming opening, but the data doesn't support a pivot. The optimization plan protects the runway. She states it as a fact, not an opinion. She does not look at David for approval. She does not scan the room for nods. She looks directly at Marcus, her gaze steady and unthreatening, the physical embodiment of a woman who does not need external permission to exist. The physical sensation of withholding the need for validation is excruciating. It feels like holding your breath underwater. Every nerve ending in her body is screaming at her to look at David, to add a qualifier, to soften the statement with a, "Does that make sense?" Or "I'm happy to walk you through the numbers." But she doesn't. She sits in the discomfort of her own authority. She lets the statement stand alone, naked and unguarded. David looks at her. He doesn't nod, he doesn't smile, but he doesn't challenge her either. He simply moves on to the next item on the agenda. And in that moment, Elena realizes something profound. The world did not end because she stopped seeking permission. The sky did not fall because she allowed herself to be misunderstood or disagreed with. The anxiety is still there, a low hum in her chest, but it is no longer the driver, it is the passenger. She is the one holding the wheel. This is the neuropsychological metamorphosis. Every time Elena chooses to hold the line, every time she sits in the morning silence, every time she withholds the desperate urge to fill the silence with an apology, every time she endures the physical discomfort of a corporate fire without reacting, she is physically rewiring her brain. The amygdala, that primal alarm bell, is sending out the same distress signal: threat, judgment, danger. But the prefrontal cortex, strengthened by the Gravitas practice, is overriding it. It is sending a new message down the neural pathways. We are safe. We do not need to react, we hold. Neuroplasticity is not a metaphor. It is a biological reality. Neurons that fire together wire together. For a decade, Elena wired her brain to associate social scrutiny with panic. Now, through deliberate, repeated action, she is forging a new pathway. She is building the neural architecture of Auctoritas. The anxiety doesn't disappear, but its power diminishes. The cortisol loop is broken, not by avoiding the stressor, but by choosing a different response. The Roman system is not a shield that blocks the arrows. It is the training that allows you to stand in the hail and keep moving forward. Thursday, 4:45 p.m. Elena is at her desk, reviewing her notes for tomorrow's review with Caroline. Her phone rings. It is an internal line. The caller ID reads, "David Chen, founding partner." She answers, Elena. David's voice is smooth, avuncular, the voice of a man who has spent 30 years learning how to deliver poison with a smile. "I wanted to give you a heads up before tomorrow. Caroline is tough. You know that. She's looking for a reason to trim the roster, and she's got her eye on the junior partner tier." Elena's grip tightens on the phone, but her voice remains level. "I'm prepared, David. I know you are, and that's why I want to help you." He pauses. She can hear the faint click of his pen through the receiver, a specific corporate trigger, the sound of a deal being struck. "If you support Marcus's pivot strategy in the review tomorrow, if you concede the point and show Caroline you're a team player, I'll make sure your name is at the top of the list for full partner, regardless of what Caroline says. I have the final say on the West Coast roster, the golden handcuff. It dangles in front of her, gleaming, a guarantee, safety. The end of the anxiety, the end of the fear of being fired, the end of the grueling uncertainty. All she has to do is walk into the review tomorrow, abandon her data, abandon her conviction, and say, Marcus is right. All she has to do is go back to being the people pleaser. All she has to do is surrender her gravitas and kneel. The silence on the line is deafening. Elena looks out the window. The San Francisco fog is rolling in, blanketing the city in a soft gray haze. She thinks of George's words. The Roman way was never designed to make you feel better. It was designed to make you harder to break. She thinks of the morning silence, the grueling practice of sitting with her own discomfort, the slow, painful construction of her inner fortress. She thinks of Elena, who sat on the kitchen floor at 2 a.m., desperate to retreat into the cage. If she takes David's deal, she is back in the cage. The door will be locked from the outside. She will have the title, the money, the security. But she will have traded her dignitas, her core dignity, for a promotion. She will have proven to herself that her authority is not her own, that it can be bought and sold by the highest bidder. She will have lost the war before it even began. David, Elena says, her voice steady and calm, carrying the quiet weight of Auctorita. I appreciate the offer, but the data supports optimization. I won't concede the point. There is a long, tense silence. The pen clicking stops. Elena, don't be stupid. This is your career. I know, she replies. That's why I'm not trading it for a seat at someone else's table. She hangs up the phone. Her hands are shaking. Her heart is pounding. The anxiety is screaming. But deep in her chest, beneath the noise, there is a stillness, a foundation of stone. The quiet choice has been made. She has chosen the system over the status. She has chosen the fortress over the cage. 6 months later, the 15th floor of the San Francisco venture capital firm, the same open plan office, the same polished concrete floors, the same smell of aggressively roasted Sumatran beans and ozone from the overworked printer, the same analysts in Patagonia vests dropping terms like Series B and EBITDA, just loud enough to be heard by the managing partners. The external world has not changed, but Elena Rodriguez has. She walks through the office at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Her posture is not defensive. Her shoulders are back, her stride measured and unhurried. She pours her coffee without spilling a drop. She does not flinch when Marcus walks by and offers a terse, clipped nod. The residue of a rivalry that Elena won months ago when Caroline, impressed by her unshakable command of the data and her refusal to be bullied, championed her promotion to full partner. Elena did not get the promotion by being safe. She got it by being immovable. She sits at her desk. She opens Slack. The cursor blinks. She types a response to a senior partner, a simple sounds good, and hits send without erasing it 7 times. She does not wait for a validation emoji. She moves on. The gray noise is still there. The hum of the office, the performatively loud phone calls, the subtle power dynamics, they haven't gone anywhere. But they no longer penetrate her. They are the rushing river, and she is the stone. She is Gravitas, Comitas, and Auctoritas incarnate stone and flame, unmoving in her dignity, burning with the quiet, fierce purpose of a woman who has conquered the only enemy that ever truly mattered, the fear of herself. You didn't click this video to watch a story about a woman in San Francisco. You clicked it because you recognized the cage. You recognized the tightness in your chest before the elevator doors opened. You recognized the hollow agreement, the forced smile, the desperate rewriting of a simple Slack message. You recognize the exhaustion of performing a version of yourself that doesn't exist, and you are tired. You are tired of the meditation apps that put you to sleep but don't help you speak up in a meeting. You are tired of quiet quitting, which is just absorbing the same stress with a side of resentment. You are tired of therapy that labels your triggers but doesn't give you a shield. The Roman system is open. The ancient firewall, Comitas, the courtesy that disarms. Gravitas, the dignity that anchors. Auctoritas, the authority that commands, is not a personality trait. It is a discipline. It is a neurological architecture. It is a fortress that you build, brick by painful brick, in the dark of the early morning and in the silence of a conference room when every fiber of your being is screaming at you to shrink. The first step isn't a new job. It isn't a promotion. It isn't a corner office. The first step is a new mindset, a decision to stop building a career and start building a soul that is harder to break. In the comments below, tell me, what is the one corporate rule you're ready to break? The rule that says you have to apologize before you speak. The rule that says you have to say yes to be valuable. The rule that says your authority comes from your job title and not your spine. Name it. Write it down. And then tomorrow at 4 a.m., sit in the dark and start building your fortress.